I love the videos where the religious give us just a little glimpse behind the curtains, when they're supposedly talking to each other and giving really terrible advice. It shows just how out of touch with reality they actually are. Granted, they don't give a crap, it's all faith and fifis all the way down, but I think it's a good place to peek in and understand what they're doing wrong and why they're doing it. Because it isn't accidental, it's institutional. It's part of being religious. And I don't think that's much of a surprise, do you? Welcome back to the last half of 5 ways to share your faith. I'm going to treat this not as learning any good tips from the religious, since I think it's obvious that none of these tips are actually any good, but I'm going to provide my own tips and explain why none of this actually works for the religious, although granted, they won't care, they never do, but for any who want to know why they fail so consistently, set aside your excuses and I'll give you the real scoop. They're not going to like that, of course, but since when has that ever mattered? So let's get back into the action, already in progress.
The idea here is to have an opener or conversation starter in mind that you can use to get to the gospel.
Look, I know you people have a real hard-on for your book, but nobody else does. Nobody else cares. Nobody outside your cult gives a crap what it says between the covers. This is something that the religious really need to get through their heads, because just saying, well, it says so in my book, doesn't change minds, at least not any worthwhile minds, or not anybody who's actually using one. You have to have evidence, and yeah, we know how that goes. I mean, I'm happy to help them out here, but they really don't want to listen because they don't have what they need in order to convince anyone with a brain. Granted, that's not really their goal, is it? I mean, too many brain cells make Christianity impossible, which is why they don't like talking to us, but just trying to give some helpful advice, whether or not you want to take it.
Some simple ones you can use are, do you go to church?
Why in the world would you need to share your faith with somebody who already goes to church? Is he trying to convert other Christians to his brand of Christianity? I don't really understand. That would probably be easier since you already know they're dumb as a post, but it seems to defeat the purpose, doesn't it? Moving your chess pieces around on the board where everybody already believes generally what you do, that seems like a complete waste of time to me. But what do I know, right?
Or, what do you think happens when you die?
If somebody asked me that, I would just laugh in their face because I know what's coming next. Now, let's be honest, we already know they don't want to talk to us. They haven't got the slightest interest in any of that. They are looking for people who are already predisposed to believe on faith, or who are so utterly clueless that they would fall for any of this, and, well, we are not that. Maybe these questions are designed to separate the clueless that they want from the ones that can see straight through their crap. I don't know. To me, that just looks like admitting failure.
Or, what are your thoughts on God?
That might actually be an interesting question, but for the religious, they'd need to have a ready excuse in case they run into somebody like me who already knows more on the subject than they do. Because they don't want someone who actually has thoughts on God, do they? They want people who are just going to look at them like a deer in the headlights so they can launch into their stupid conversion tactics. They don't want people with a brain. People with brains scare them. They don't want people who understand reality because they're terrified of reality. And they certainly want no one who understands their religion before they get there. They're looking for dumb people because dumb people are about the only ones you're going to get to fall for any of this nonsense.
Having an effective opener that you can use to get to the gospel takes practice though, which leads to tip number 4. gain experience. Luke chapter 22, verses 61 to 62. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So Peter went out and wept bitterly.
What does that have to do with anything? This guy seems to think that just picking random Bible verses somehow means something, and he's just wrong. Now, yes, I agree, you need to gain experience. We all do, but this is where we have to go back to STR, because they know that their students, no matter how much experience they have, they know that they're going to fail the vast majority of the time. So they make excuses up front for why their students aren't going to get anywhere, so that their students don't give up and stop paying them. Yet that is exactly the experience that you need to get. The religious won't like that, but getting into the lion's den and getting soundly trounced over and over and over and over and over again, that's great to get the brain cells firing, so you realize just how ludicrous your beliefs actually are in the first place. No, I'm sure that's not what our theist here wants, but it's a fantastic way to get these people to deconvert, if they are at all honest.
In this passage, it was the night of Jesus' betrayal. Jesus was arrested, and as Peter tried following him, people pointed to Peter and said, "Hey, aren't you one of Jesus' followers?" And Peter denied those claims and said, "What are you talking about? I don't know Jesus." And once Peter denied Jesus 3 times, the rooster crowed as Jesus predicted, and Peter ran away in shame with feelings of failure.
Well, that's your story at least, and I'm sure that you expect everyone to just take your story as gospel truth. No pun intended. But why would they do that? And this goes for everything in the Bible. Why should we take any of it seriously if you haven't provided any evidence that any of it ever happened at all? Granted, this particular story is meant to prove a point to those that already believe, but it's still useful to be skeptical at any of these tall tales. The religious, they don't want you to do that. They want you to believe on faith, and you shouldn't do that at all. You should be asking a whole lot of questions, and they don't have any decent answers. Hell, have your own list of questions at hand for when you run into these people, because they're not going to like that very much, are they?
So all of that to say, when it comes to witnessing to people, like Peter, we are works in progress. We will most likely butcher things and will probably come off as awkward or downright weird. But if you look at Peter, despite his failure and acts of cowardice here in the book of Luke and the book of Acts, God uses Peter to preach to thousands of people as seen in Acts chapter 2.
My book says a thing. Big deal. The whole point of this video, I'm assuming, is to provide tips for sharing your faith. But unless you're out there specifically looking to be awkward or to look like a freak, none of this is going to do anything but embarrass you. Or at least it should. I don't know. Maybe the whole point of this is to make an effort. Success be damned. Maybe they don't care if they actually win any souls to Christ, because that seems like a complete waste of time, but hey, you do you, I guess. I'm really wondering what they hope to accomplish, because the way that they're going about it, they are not going to get anywhere at all. And if they actually want to be successful, then they really need to reevaluate their efforts and realize that an ever-increasing number of people these days are actually looking for something other than what they're spouting. They're looking for evidence, not the gospel, not claims, not faith, facts, demonstrable, verifiable facts. And what's the one thing this guy hasn't had any of so far? You guessed it, facts. Now, I know that they think their beliefs are true, which honestly they shouldn't, but as Dean Wormer says,
fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
These people just need to be better, don't they?
So if you're scared that you'll say the wrong thing or that you'll forget something, you probably will, and that's okay.
That's where the experience comes in. But if you're not learning anything along the way, then all the experience in the world, it doesn't matter. If you're just going to keep saying stupid stuff every time you get out, then all the experience doesn't mean anything. And sadly, I think a lot of these people have scripts. They follow the scripts and they never deviate from them, no matter how badly it goes, because they're just telling themselves lies instead of refining their approach with that experience. This is where the standard, well, it's not you, it's on God thing, just hurts their development. They don't improve because they don't take any responsibility for bettering themselves. They figure that just spouting Bible verses is going to work eventually, and if it doesn't, hey, at least they tried and now it's in God's lap to make the conversion magically. They're gone, on to the next victim by then, and now it's up to God. I mean, the whole process is just absurd.
None of us are perfect, and like Peter, God will be patient with us as we attempt to do what he says. And as we continue to make attempts and fail and fall and make mistakes, we'll also learn what works, what doesn't work, what's natural to us, and you start to pick up tips and tricks to make conversations easier.
Easier, but not any more intelligent. That's the problem. They never get to the point of, well, this Bible verse thing doesn't work. What else can I do? Because eventually they have to figure out that they need something more than just words. They need evidence. Otherwise, they're just going to do the same thing over and over and over again. And you know what that's called, right? Insanity. Learning doesn't matter if you don't improve, if you don't get better, if you don't weed things out that don't work out of your repertoire. And why do I think they'll never do that? I wonder.
The idea is to keep trying to share your faith, because if you do, the time will come when witnessing to your friends and family becomes natural because you've done it so many times.
But if it doesn't become successful, then what difference does it make? Now, I'm honestly trying to help them out here, even though I don't think it's really going to help, because at the end of the day, witnessing doesn't matter if the thing that you're witnessing about isn't demonstrably true. That's why I point out that just saying words or reading from your book, that isn't going to be successful because nobody cares what you say or what your book says. We care if any of it is demonstrably and factually correct. And you need to be able to demonstrate that. And these people, they're not even trying. And that's why you need to come in with your A game. And the religious, at least in my experience, they just don't. They think that the things that sound good to them as existing believers, those are going to sound good to everybody else too. But that's very easy to disprove. If a Christian ever talked to, say, a Muslim, they've seen the same thing in action because they all do it. The Muslim just quotes from the Quran. They all say the things that their religion believes on faith with no evidence presented in support. Did that work on the Christian? No, of course not, nor should it. And when the Christian does the same thing to the Muslim doesn't change their mind either. So why should they think that doing the same thing is going to work on an atheist? It's not us being unreasonable, it's us rejecting these nonsensical methods that don't work on anyone because we're not dumb. They shouldn't be dumb either. They should be able to step outside of their echo chamber and realize just how bad these things that they say sound to the people on the outside. Because it isn't convincing at all. It just makes people look at you funny and slowly back away.
So get there, one conversation at a time. And tip number 5, exercise faith. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. For we walk by faith, not by sight. In this passage, Paul tells the Corinthian church to walk or live by faith and not by the things that they can see.
That's the problem, though. It's bad advice. Now, a lot of the stuff in the Bible is bad advice, but when you've got an emotional attachment to cling to, you stop being able to see the reality and you only live in the fantasy. And again, that's why Christians and other religions, to be fair, they do so badly. They just want to believe, but they don't understand what people outside of their cult require in order to consider these beliefs rationally defensible. When you don't start with rationality, you're not going to get very far with those that do. Faith is not a virtue. And I know you don't like that fact, but it is a fact nonetheless. Faith is just the excuse that you give yourself for believing things that you really wish were true, but that aren't actually true in demonstrable reality. It's just another word for delusion. You don't want to be delusional, but that's what you look like to people on the outside. And that's just another reason why you fail. You don't know what this crazy God nonsense makes you sound like, and you really don't care. And I'm sorry, but you need to care. You need to approach this from a rational perspective. And I think that spending some time trying to do that, it could only help when they ultimately realize that it just isn't possible. Their beliefs are inherently batshit insane. They won't get there, of course, because they're incapable of stepping back out of the faith bubble and evaluating their beliefs intellectually. This is what happened to me, and look where I ended up.
So when you're witnessing to friends, I'm not gonna lie, when you first start off, it's incredibly intimidating. It's like standing in front of a cliff that you need to jump off of and you're just freaking out.
And why do you need to do that? That's an honest question. Because a book tells you to do it? So what? Because your pastor tells you to do it. Big deal. I mean, he's only after increased revenue as his parishioners bring in new converts to fill his collection plate. Fuck your pastor. He's got bills to pay. He's not after the truth. You need to honestly evaluate what you're doing and why. What do you demonstrably get out of it? And I do mean demonstrably. How do you benefit? Again, demonstrably. Ask yourself some serious questions, because if you can do that and give yourself some serious answers, I think that you're going to see that none of this is at all defensible. Of course, that requires getting out of that faith bubble that I was talking about before. Doing it because someone told you that you should do it, that's not really a good reason to do it. Develop a brain and a backbone on your own. It's really not that hard.
And I remember one time I felt the need to share the gospel to my coworker, and I remember being so crippled by fear that I didn't say anything despite me having countless opportunities.
That's probably a good thing, since you're there to work, not to convert people. And trust me, I've had people try to convert me at work before, and it just gets in the way of what we're actually there to do. Stop yapping. Start working. Otherwise, you're going to lose your job, and you can go talk to homeless people on the street full time. At least the rest of us will get more done, and I figure that's a pretty good thing.
So for those of you freaking out at the thought of witnessing to someone, I've been there. And sometimes you just have to go for it. You pray, you ask God for strength, and then you risk it for the biscuit and you throw out your opener and do your best to get to the gospel.
And you're just wasting your time because nobody cares about the gospel like you do. That's why I keep stressing that most people aren't like the religious. They really want to think that everybody is just like they are, but that's not true. They really want to believe that, given the same information, everybody's just going to leap into the life of a theist like they did. But that is not the case. In fact, I'm firmly convinced that the overwhelming majority of people on the planet who profess Christianity, and probably Muslims and Hindus and, pretty much all religious beliefs, most of them are just playing word games. They don't really buy into it. They just profess because they think it makes them look good to the neighbors. They do it for the sense of community. They do it because it makes them happy. They don't think there really is some magical man sitting up there on a cloud somewhere watching over them, because that's stupid. And it's why I think it's really too bad that we can't find a way to see what everyone actually believes. All the people who say, well, I'm a Christian for social reasons, they would fall away immediately. And I think we'd see that the overwhelming majority of everybody out there I think they're all really atheists. They're just doing what they think they have to do to get by. And there's nothing wrong with that on some level, but I think the inherent lack of honesty that represents, that causes problems. It makes the real crazies who really buy into it, it makes them feel more empowered because everybody around them just says that they believe. If they had to deal with their actual numbers, the people who actually believe, I'm hoping that they wouldn't bother. And I think they would just leave us alone and huddle together in their churches and pray their brains out for everybody else to convert. But isn't that what we really want to have happen anyway? To get these people to go away and hide someplace so they don't bother the rest of us? I mean, I know I'd sure like it if these people would just realize how embarrassing their beliefs are and shut the hell up. Wouldn't that be nice?
So I'd encourage you, see your friend's soul and take a step of faith knowing that God is strong and wise enough to help you.
Then why do these people fail so often? That's another honest question. Because they have all kinds of bald rationalizations for why they fail. They make up excuses for why they get laughed at. If God will provide, why doesn't He? In anything. The world works in a way that is utterly indistinguishable from no gods existing at all. We realize this. They can't bring themselves to do the same. God isn't helping anyone, at least not demonstrably. God is just an imaginary friend in your head. God is an excuse for why you're so bad at this. Well, God has a plan. No, you're just an idiot, and maybe you ought to stop that. That's just a helpful hint.
Okay? So should the time come and you need to share your faith with someone, remember these 5 tips. Get to the gospel, see their soul, have an opener in mind, gain experience, and exercise faith. I should also mention to you that this video is the first edition of a 2-part series, where next week I'll cover 5 more tips that will hopefully continue to help people who want to share their faith.
Oh, good. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you want me to do that video too, although I don't really know if it's really worthwhile given the complete and utter failure of everything that was said here. But if you want me to, let me know. I'll think about it. Yes, I know that none of this was aimed at us. It wasn't even hinted that atheists should watch this, but we do so anyhow, just to see how badly things go on the inside. This is not impressive, and I honestly do try to help when I can, just because it's pretty easy for me to see what's going wrong, and the religious don't seem to have a clue. But the only real piece of advice that I can give is the one that they will never ever accept. Don't do it, or at the very least, think about it outside of your faith. Try to understand what your victim is actually looking for, because I can tell you right now, it is probably not what you have. Stop making excuses. Stop pretending that you're on the right side of everything and anybody who doesn't agree with you is automatically on the wrong. Actually look at these things objectively, again, without the dead weight of faith, and try to care about the real world, because that's where you live whether you like it or not. Now, that's a lot to put on the religious, I know, and those are a lot of things that they will never accept because it does away with the sole reason for religion in the first place. Fifis. But it's just got to be done. If you are terrified of what the real world says about your beliefs, then maybe you ought to be, because I've been there. I know how it feels, and I know where it leads if you only care about your faith. And if you don't only care about your faith, well, you're going to end up someplace you don't really want to go. You're not going to follow the path that I charted and get to reality, which is something that the religious just don't want to do. However, that really is the only way to go if you want to get to reality. It's the only way to get better. And I know that's not what the religious really want to do, but trust me, as somebody who's been through the process, it really is the only way. So come join the side who actually gives a damn about the facts. Stop harassing people with your absurd and ludicrous fairy tales. At the very least, if you think that they're true, go and check it out for yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It's only the people who can't do that or won't do that who are going to be left behind. The rest of us, we're going to be out there in the real world enjoying the only life that we demonstrably have instead of wasting it on our knees. So come on in. The water's fine.